I was really excited for this conversation because I knew it would be really optimistic. Brock's got a lot of positive spins on things where I think there's a lot of work to be done, but it is possible in solving these problems, these Roundnet things. And I hope you all enjoy and laugh as much as we got to laugh in this conversation. And otherwise, sound off in the comments. I like to read all of those and just hear your feedback. So thanks for that. And one last note, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. 2 out of 3 of you are not subscribing, and that really helps me continue putting out more work for you. So every little bit helps. Thanks for your support. Enjoy. I'm really excited to be sitting down for a chat with Broxton Leibold today. Brock, why don't you just start with telling us what you're up to?
Yeah, hey guys. My name is Broxton Leibold, or Brock Leibold, known in the Roundnet community. I am the founder and chief designer at Nemesis Apparel. Lots of big stuff going on this weekend. So if you're not, this will come out after the championship, but this was right before the championship. So super busy getting some stuff there. I feel like I've had like 10 jerseys being shipped to people's houses by the championship so that they can get there in time this weekend. So a little stressful. There's a few things that we're like, shoot, it's going to get there on Saturday at your house and you're not going to be there. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're delivering it Thursday. And I'm like, oh, praise God. So life's good. Things are going well. Yeah, overall, we are busy, but there is zero sadness in being busy.
When it's the stuff you're passionate about, and by good fortune also getting paid to do that hard work, I could not agree more. Amazing. I know there's a lot of things we wanted to cover today. Let you just touch on the championship really quick. I know you had a stat prepared around how many pro level teams are playing the championship wearing Nemesis. So drop what that number looks like.
Yeah, I think we have 13 to 14 teams across both open and women's in Nemesis jerseys this weekend. So really exciting. As our first year, like our first fiscal year, it's like, I'm super ecstatic. It's more than I could have expected. And I think what's exciting to me is like how much of it was people reaching out to me and not vice versa. I think that's always exciting when it's just like, you're not going and scraping down doors. People are coming to you and asking questions, and that's really exciting. But just it's overwhelming and amazing.
That's awesome. I know one particular thing that's interesting with how you've set up Nemesis this year is you've been partnering with a lot of pro players to help them raise some funds towards their jerseys. If you're familiar with any major sport where people sell their jerseys and they get a bonus based on how many jerseys they sell as pro players, pro athletes, what kind of conversations have you been able to have to drive that mutual value? I think in Roundnet, a lot of people maybe get caught up in not wanting to pay for things or maybe not wanting to buy in on things. How have you demonstrated, hey, this is good for you, it's good for me, and therefore we can do more for Roundnet? What's that conversation like with players?
Yeah, great question. I think we're in an interesting spot because it's a mix of value and it's a mix of profitability, because without any profitability, you can't be somewhere. But it was most of the funding for players and through jersey sales was definitely through like the Team Canada ordering system, because they made a bit of money off everything they sold. I made a bit of money off everything they sold, and Team Canada made a bit of money off everything they sold. Obviously, when you have a jersey that's $75, $65, there's it's not amazing margins, but like you make things work. And like those sales are still going on. I have no idea when the Team Canada and that kind of stuff order is ending, but I know like Team Ireland, Team Canada, and Team Mexico like counting orders, and they're gonna get paid based on how much they sold. And I think it's like so intuitive. Like I don't think it's a crazy thought to be like, oh, hey, people want to wear your stuff, and I sell their stuff, and we can both make money off of people wearing your stuff. The extra jerseys, I think we sold somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 something in 48 hours, which is like no mean feat. Also the jerseys were like the cheapest thing we've ever sold, because I wanted to just, like, me and Emerson were like, hey, we don't care about making money off these. We just want them in people's hands like as fast as possible. We sent so many of those to Europe, it's not even funny. Like I was like, I don't even know how to pronounce this street name. Like I have no idea where this is, but I will send you extra jerseys. And I think the question is like, okay, you put something on sale. Now, is the expectation to be on sale? But as someone who's like owning the company and understanding like profit margins, that kind of stuff, it's like it was a sale and free marketing, really.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, I tell you that there's places I can't even pronounce, there's Nemesis jerseys in places I can't even pronounce. Like, there's two ways to look at that, right? Yeah, that was a really cool angle with Emerson and like the Team Canada stuff. I think the most, was it Diaz sold 69 jerseys, which I think that was crazy. Like, the stats there were nuts. Really crazy, cool process. Also, Team Canada was like one of the first big projects we did. It's a little overwhelming, and I'm so happy that we did it because I'm so much more prepared for Worlds coming up and stuff. But yeah, I think it's very intuitive for there to be a Roundnet Pro Shop and for there to be things that like you can go and just buy your favorite Roundnet player's Roundnet jersey. I don't think that's a stretch of the imagination, that it just is intuitive. And I think it's intuitive for pro players to make a cut of money off of that as well. Like, I don't know. I think that just makes sense.
I would jump in and just note, like, whether it's, being made by, Nemesis or any other apparel like place. Like, I think the interesting thing is like a pro shop. I think there could be more than one place where people can go find those things, and I think that's kind of like the way that the sport is like evolving and growing. Is we're kind of building these things as we find interest in them. So, maybe a year or two ago, people didn't want to wear people's jerseys, and now you're selling dozens and dozens of jerseys for just one player on one national team, which is incredible.
Yeah.
I got to hit you with a hard question here, Brock. You're repping Team Canada's gold jersey.
I thought you were going to ask that.
I have to ask, when are we going to see more than one of these?
No, this is just me being egotistic. So
you're telling me if Vinny and Eddie had just won that last set, we're not going to get commemorative gold jerseys for Team Canada? Oof,
it would have
been a hard bargain.
It would have been a gold jersey. It wouldn't look like this though. This was
fair enough.
This is I can so I will jersey. That's literally it. One night I woke up at 11:30 p.m. in a cold sweat, and I want a gold Canada jersey because I can do it. This was like April. Like, this was back. Like, this was before.
Sure. Very early.
Yeah, this was really early, and I went, I can, so I will, and now I do. And it's one of my favorite perks about owning something like this, where it's just like, if I want it, I have like a Ninja Turtles and a Glizzy Gladiator jersey in my closet and an in-system jersey. And I think as someone who understands that excitement, I don't think there's anything better than to share that excitement with other people, right? Because it's like, I want these jerseys. Like, I want them in my closet, So why wouldn't other people want them in theirs, right?
Yeah, being able to create things and share them with other people, I can totally relate. I'm just very happy for you that you're able to go to sleep early enough that you can wake up at 11:30 in a cold sweat. That's incredible. I wish I could go to sleep that early.
There are a lot. My rhythm is way out of whack recently. Yeah.
No worries. And so that's awesome though that you've kind of seen some of these projects for Nemesis pushing yourself forward and also pushing like some of the communities you're able to support forward. You've talked and you've wanted to talk more about kind of some opportunities you're seeing in the college scene. I know a lot of people in the US talk about how much opportunities are in the college scene, and in particular the access to resources, because college is really expensive, but one perk of that is the money you've already spent is then at your fingertips. So where do you see kind of Nemesis tapping into college? And if you want to talk about how you're supporting universities right now, how you're interacting with them, it sounds like it's been quite busy for you to start the academic year. Yeah,
so I thought like, hey, the summer's coming to a close, it's going to slow down. I was the opposite. Correct. I was completely wrong. This is the most busy I've been all summer, and this was my full-time job all summer. So maybe it's not like the most hours I've put in, because obviously I've had to step back, but like per capita of hours, if that makes sense, it's the most busy I've been. But yeah, dude, schools are just so great to work with. Not only is it like they'll be buying 40 or 50 jerseys, which is awesome, but it's also like the people are so fun to work with, and I'm a college student, so I understand them. And they have good taste when it comes to these kind of things, and they understand what they want. It's also like they all are like, hey, we want the jerseys by October. And they're used to that needing to be done months ago. Just because when you're a small boat, you can turn really quick. Like Nemesis is, it's really easy to get these things out the door in time. But it's just about like keeping lists and like keeping on top of projects and not ghosting people and making sure that you're following up. And it's just like step, 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 step. And if you can make sure that you're, responding to when you need to respond, it's not overly difficult because I work pretty quick when I'm at the computer. The majority of my time is spent communicating. The vast minority of my time is spent designing. And also, you don't always get to decide when all of a sudden you're good at designing. Like, there are projects that I have right now that I haven't, like, I'm like, hey guys, I'm sitting on this for a minute because I need that creativity, and it isn't here yet, but I'll let you know what it is. And thankfully, people are super understanding because they would rather have something that's really good, not something that's rushed. So, yeah, you can sit on those things, but college is like, I don't know, it's a really cool scene. And I see it as one of the biggest ways that the sport is growing and should grow in the future by getting a bunch of 20 to 23 to 24-year-olds really interested in a sport for their school. And then that could blossom into them taking it seriously and going pro later in life. And I think that I'm super invested in going from like giving clubs jerseys to give away at tournaments to giving them Nemesis Observer jerseys and stuff like that, to t-shirts, to other things. It's like, these are the future, these people are the future of the sport, and I want to show them that I believe in that, right? So that's kind of the whole emotion and feeling around college Roundnet, is that it's super important.
I totally agree. I think if anything else, like having communities and those resources in college is like community building on easy mode. Like everyone lives really close. You are kind of forced to, be in the spaces of these people. And you also have so many resources at your fingertips that if you can build that culture of growing community in a university setting, once you leave college,
right,
it's so much more challenging because there's a lot more life happening. As you mentioned, like you had your summer off and you were working on this full time. Now you're back at school and it's that much harder to work on Nemesis Apparel. I think the same is true for being part of a club in college versus being part of a club when you have,
right,
life to contend with.
Yeah.
But that's amazing that you're finding success there. I think for my part, when I was in college, I didn't have as much momentum, and very much want to make sure more and more people who are in universities right now realize that this sport is still really young and it's kind of like theirs for the taking. And honestly,
right, exactly.
It needs to be taken on because there's more and more things to get done, and that's where the majority of people are coming up and like finding the sport is in their universities. So it's I always say it's like two-sided. It's a little daunting, but it's also a really cool opportunity.
Absolutely.
I wanted to touch on, like you've said, you're able to find value and kind of these profit margins in whether it's some campaigns are made more for marketing, maybe some are more like, profit leaders, not worrying so much about going to the business of things. I'm not knowledgeable enough on business myself to like give you the right questions, and I don't think that'll make people excited. But something I think that everybody can relate to is this idea of, okay, this Brock guy wants to do this stuff. We got to pay him to do it. I'm curious if you've had like any uphill battles in trying to value the work you're doing and trying to find these like price points that make it make sense for the work and effort you put in. Right. And if you've had any conversations with folks about, driving that value and showing that you want to continue doing this work.
Not in a long time. I think that's the answer.
Okay.
I've gotten pretty good at saying no. And I don't know if pleasantly surprised is the right word, but I've been pleasantly surprised by the understanding of the Roundnet community. I think that as college students, they understand that things cost money. And I'm also cheaper than the alternatives. So it's not really difficult to stretch to the imagination that like, hey, there's a college kid who works really hard and is really invested in the Roundnet community, and he makes jerseys. We should go to him instead of someone else. But at the same time, it's like I think something that people really don't understand is that when there's only two players on a team, it is really hard to price out creative work because two people are paying for like a few hours of my graphic design time, which is not cheap. And this is one of the biggest conversations that people talk to me. They're like, dude, I love your jerseys. I love everything you do. why is the logo placement so big on the back? And I hear this and I understand it. But when you have a sport that is small, you're kind of getting jerseys with ads. Like if you want to pay for cheaper Disney Plus, you get Disney Plus with ads.
And someone's got to pay for it, and right now you're paying for it, and in exchange for paying for it, you get a bigger ad space.
Yeah, because the price that my jerseys are for like a team right now, it's $120 American, for 2 jerseys, including design, shipping, all of that shipped to your door. But if I spend 3 hours on your jerseys, I charge $100 per hour in my freelance work, right? So without prices of jerseys, that's $300, right? That's also Canadian, so that's closer to like $240 maybe. So there, that's like,
we're doing live math on an interview.
Yeah. So like, where is that value going, right? First of all, I love you as a Roundnet player, and I want to support you, and I want you to look your best, because if you look better, the sport grows, right? Like, the more professional the players look, the bigger the sport grows, and that's just natural. And I'm invested in the future of Roundnet, basically, is what I'm showing by making my prices affordable so that anyone can afford them, really. Second is the Nemesis placement on the back has been the biggest catalyst of my growth, period. There's no argument anywhere else. Sure, the Instagram, I have like 500 followers, right? It's like, cool. Sure, like Team Canada, but like those get like one little placement here, and that's it. This is one that is replaced by Spikeball on the actual prints. There's a Spikeball one on the back, and then I get one on the front. And I'm absurdly grateful for this. But this all goes to say the value proposition has to go somewhere. For Team Canada, it was their Team Canada. A little logo placement on them is worth 10 times more than a local contender team from 2 hours away from me. Like, where is that value going? So when a club will reach out and go, hey, we love your stuff, want to work with you, but we don't want a Nemesis placement on the back. Fine, but the price goes up, if that makes sense, because you're losing that value proposition somewhere. People have been like, hey, I want you to design jerseys, but we want them printed somewhere else. I go, okay, but like, you're paying market prices, you're not paying Nemesis prices. And that's not to say that like I'm only here for the money and the value, because that's not true at all. Like, if I've been doing this work for 2021, like I've been doing jerseys for 3 years, with a supplier where I'm barely making any money until recently with the new switch to like normal neck jerseys that are so much nicer. But I just didn't have the business knowledge to go and find something that was going to work better for me. But before that, I was making $5 to $10 a jersey at club pricing, right? And like, I was getting like, I don't know, 10 jerseys every 2 months sold in the old ways. And I love it so much. Like, I genuinely, it's what I wake up and want to do. And yeah, so that's where it's like, it's something that I can support myself with. It's something that the community is, honestly, they're so grateful, and it makes me so grateful. And I want to continue to do it. And it's just, yeah, there's nothing better, honestly.
That's awesome. I'd love to like kind of pivot, because you talked a lot about how much you find like value proposition in the work you're doing, and where you like exchange that value and then kind of like create a product that people want, and also you get value out of doing the work. Hopefully that makes sense to most folks. If you've got questions, Brox, like you said, spends most of his time talking to people. Not that he wants to talk about the nuances of this stuff all the time, but I'm sure he's receptive to input. So you can drop comments below. Brock's usually one of the first people to comment on these goofy chats anyway. So
I will respond to every one of them for 2 weeks, I promise.
I wanted to jump to the other side of things and think about like players. I guess you've had a success with players valuing the work you're doing for them. I'm curious what your perspective is. We haven't gotten to talk about this a ton, with how you think players do or don't value just Roundnet generally. And I'd love to you can go wherever you want with this.
Right. I think there's kind of 2 ways to look at this, right? There's time, and then there's money. Because the two correlate a lot, but when you're a college student, they don't really, It's like, as soon as you get locked into school and like you're away from home and you're not in a comfortable job, it's like, you don't really have the money. And if you're in a super crazy major or whatever, you might not have the time. But people make time for the things that people make time and money for the things they really care about, right? So I think it's really important to break these two things down and say, okay, what are we as a Roundnet community giving to the players, right? And I think that's it's hard to be like, okay, the players don't care enough. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of them do, a lot more than it might look like from people who, I don't know. Like I know I'm disconnected from the overall Roundnet community in Ontario. Like we've got a good place here, and like the Waterloo Roundnet that's the club I'm a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Like we love going out and just hanging out with each other. And I think as the community grows and as people gain connections with each other again, and as they continue to grow their already existing connections, I think that the people have to be the catalyst to the sport. I think as the sport is right now, you can't really expect people to like, I'm here for Roundnet and Roundnet only. I think it's the same reason that there's not like crazy beefs in Roundnet. Like you don't see people swearing at each other and yelling at each other on the field very often. It's because the community is such a thing that drives. For the most part. Unless someone calls 5 seconds rules and they're wrong. Or they're right and you're upset because you were wrong. But I think it's
That's
like...
That's a weird hypothetical,
really...
but boy, I'll ignore that.
I think, yeah, there's definitely not one specific scenario I'm thinking about in my head or anything. I think it's really important to understand, like, the community is what drives the overall growth of the sport. And if you have a healthy community, you have a healthy sport. And if you have a healthy community, it grows. And I think that's why the question, do Roundnet players appreciate Roundnet? It's like, yes, absolutely, they do. But they also appreciate the friends that are there. They appreciate the communities that arise. They appreciate their local stuff. And if your sport starts to push some of your favorite people away because they have to be gone so often, it's hard for them to value Roundnet as much. That's, I guess, my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's very niche. But as far as like that example of people being like away, is that people traveling outside of that bubble or being not part of that community because they're off playing Roundnet elsewhere, or is it like people stepping away from the sport altogether, or some combination thereof?
Because they're going all around the country playing. It's really hard to obtain and grow your small community because all your best players are not there.
Interesting. I when I think about like people valuing Roundnet, I don't think about how we prioritize growing local communities, but I hear where you're coming from. That like yes, not only is like local and just general community health really vital for the growth of the sport. The examples are everywhere, right? Where you see a community doing well, you see the sport like being enjoyed and played well.
Right.
But to say, I'll have to think on that some more. But I do agree. I do agree that players traveling around is worse for the communities. I don't know. I maybe lose you on how that ties back to the value. Or how people value.
Sure. Let me expand, baby. Yeah. Sure. No, that makes sense. So kind of my whole thought is that people value the sport because they value people intrinsically. We're very grown to like long for community. And because we enjoy the communities that we're a part of, people value Roundnet because they see it as those people that they spend time with. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. I guess like to that point, I'm not sure if you're like in a fraternity. I feel like some people will sometimes compare like the value they get on like Greek life as an example, where people are paying dues to be part of like an organization, and then they get a lot of community out of that. Some people say, oh, you're paying for friends, but like in the Roundnet community, we pay for our friends because we spend money on all these experiences, right?
Yeah.
So like, and that's true for any friendship anywhere, right? Unless you like only play like the same board game with your friends all the time, which is also valid.
Yeah. For
people valuing Roundnet, then I'm trying to think about it not from a like intrinsically, but beyond the intrinsic, that the extrinsic can like help drive it. Where do you think like that? To me, like my perspective is, I don't think that the Roundnet community actually values Roundnet because they actually just value the community so much, and they're not really as attached to the sport. It just happens to be the thing they play with their friends.
Right. And I guess that's my exact point too.
You think they're intrinsically linked, that they can't be taken apart from each other?
So not that they can't. I'm talking about like what they currently are. I think that the reason that people like Roundnet so much is because, hey, we see a bunch of people playing it in the park. We go and play Roundnet. We get hooked on the concept of Roundnet because it is genuinely so fun. Like, I don't know many better feelings than getting it crazy up, getting it back off the net, and winning a point. I think that if you want to get into the psychology of it, it's like adrenaline plus people equal you want to see the people more often. So you want to play Roundnet more often. I think you're probably, So what I'm probably missing is that I'm more of a person who thinks on logic plus emotion equals conclusion. But you're thinking on the side of, okay, we have a sport. If you take away the people, if you take away everyone in a vacuum, does people still value the sport that we have and the way it's growing and the way it is currently? I would say that people probably hold Roundnet in a place in their heads and in their hearts where it's something that they've been doing for so long that they enjoy it, but also they don't want it to change because it's been the way they are for so long, and they're worried that if it changes, those feelings that they get about the sport as it currently is might not exist any longer. And also people might leave, but we don't want to talk about the people right now, but the people might leave, and therefore they might not enjoy Roundnet as much.
I feel like we're in a lot of places, not in a bad way, but in a way that I couldn't like properly synthesize. So maybe that could just be me. I guess for me, where I'm like trying to drive or wanting to like think about this more specifically is like we talked a lot before about how people are finding value in and then not just, it's not that people are just like, oh, like Nemesis Apparel, like that makes me want to play around it more, but it's like Nemesis Apparel, I'm going to purchase this product. Where similarly for Roundnet, we don't have a lot of ways, or we don't have even, I would say we don't have a healthy culture. You talked about like community being important, a healthy community. I don't think we have a healthy culture of understanding the costs of the sport being where it is.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I'll just say plainly, my understanding of like one tournament versus another is like when I run a tournament now, I have to charge a certain price because again, there's like we've talked about with any other work, there's a certain value proposition in the work that goes into stuff so that I can pay myself, I try to go for at least $20 an hour, which I think is really, really low. And also pay other people that are doing all the work on things. And then on top of that, you compare it to how the sport has been before, where in the past, nobody ran tournaments except for one manufacturing company. And this predates a lot of people, but the idea that before tournaments cost a lot less, but were that same like emotional and social enjoyment, that fun you had for a quarter the price, is that today when we see the price tag go up on what it costs to be part of these events, we don't actually value the sport in a way that previously I would say it was subsidized by a company that was just marketing.
Right. Yeah. We kind of got everything handed to us via Spikeball. Yeah.
And so I'm curious if you feel like we're making progress on valuing the sport more by seeing the real cost of things happening. Or if, again, I think what you've said is all very fascinating, and I agree with.
It's
most
just a
of it,
different
but
angle.
I also can't make heads and tails of it. Yeah, you did a lot of I feel like sideways thinking, which is super valid. But I'm curious, in your estimation of things, how well things feel valued, because I'll say it plainly, just in case anybody's like thinking I'm beating around the bush. I don't feel like my work is valued for almost everything that I do for the Roundnet community. I have a lot more to say about that, and that's not really here nor there for this conversation, but just from your perspective and seeing yourself be valued versus, I know a lot of other people in the Canadian community that I would say are also not properly valued. I'm just curious how you feel about people valuing the sport.
Peter from Mississauga is one of the most valuable people in Canada when it comes to Roundnet, period. Actually, I think he definitely is. And I think that these people are,
with respect to everybody that's doing a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, yeah. But yeah, I think as someone who's not a tournament director, it's harder for me to see these things. And maybe you're giving me something to think upon. Like, hey, do I value Roundnet enough to, like that kind of stuff. I understand tournament costs and that kind of stuff because lots of conversations with Peter. But yeah, because when I think of a lot of the job I do is relational. So that's just where my brain goes because I want to think about how things make people feel, because that's a lot of what I have to deal with, even though I'm like making jerseys. Like, why do you care? But like that creation.
I think it's the same for me when I run a tournament, right? Like you're trying to deliver an experience and like a certain sort of emotion,
sure,
whether it's with a jersey or with like, an event. So I hope most people think about it that way.
Yeah. I definitely feel like there is, especially like in Ontario, like people are not playing as much and they don't want to spend the money on jerseys, and they don't want to come out to tournaments anymore because like we're in a really weird space where a lot of people are moving on, and I think that's so natural, and I think that's totally okay. But I definitely feel I totally agree with you that people don't value Roundnet enough. Like as a sport, I don't think they value Roundnet enough. Absolutely. Personally, it's hard because it started as a backyard game to be like, hey, this game that you used to play with a beer in your hand, now also super competitive, come out and play with a bunch of people who take it really seriously. I think it's really unnatural for some people to jump into that and go, oh, I'm going to take this serious. But
Totally.
I do think that there is a lack of, I mean, like I saw a tournament this summer get canceled because people just wouldn't sign up early enough. Like, and then it gets canceled, and like 40 people come out of the woodwork being like, "Hey, I was gonna sign up for this tournament 2 days before it. Why did you cancel it?" And it's like, because you didn't sign up for it, and you don't take it seriously in any way. That like, hey, this is a real thing that people are planning, and people need to know how much nets they need to have. People need to know what kind of fields they need to have. People need to know how many people they need to be there. Like, it's crazy to be like, hey, the round net scene waits for me, and I think that's a big problem. Is that people think that. I mean, a lot of people think the world revolves around them. It's just the fact. It's just a fact, right?
Well, it does for some,
but I think,
so can't fault them.
Right.
Sorry,
I
just in
think
case those people listening to this podcast, I don't think they would be, but they might.
Yeah, I definitely think some of them would be. But it's hard because as someone who works with a lot of types of people, I don't know. I'm pretty empathetic towards people who feel certain ways about that kind of stuff because I'm very non-confrontational. So I'm just like, hey, if you want to go do that, go do your thing. But like, if you aren't signing up for tournaments, I sign up for my tournaments 2 months, a month in advance. If I know who my partner is, like as soon as I know who my partner is and it's confirmed, I'm signed up. If I need to switch later, I'm going to switch later, but it's no big deal. But yeah, people just don't prioritize letting people know when they're going to be places. Yeah, it sucks. Totally
I think
that.
I was kind of like poking and prodding that. I was like, I actually just want to vent here for a minute. But what you did point at the end there is, I think, like the really poignant thing, which is like this pitch that Roundnet could be or has become this very serious thing with now world championships and all these like federations trying to like harness all this energy to grow the sport. And most people are like, I was just actually playing with my friends on the quad in uni and it was a blast. Is like a bit of like a culture shock. And so, no, I like can totally empathize with that, and have seen tons of people who are like, like I don't want to take it that seriously. I think like the really important message that I hope comes across in like sharing like that contrast is just that it's okay if it's like just a fun thing for you, but if you are someone who like really thinks it's like a serious thing, like I think there's more responsibilities that come with that aspiration, right? Like in the same way that you, coming back to where we started this conversation on Nemesis, you weren't just like, like just give me some money, I'll make a design. You're like, no, this is like a brand. I'm going to operate formally. Even if it's the first time I'm taking on these business responsibilities, I'm going to treat them like such. And in setting this expectation for myself, I have an expectation of a customer, and I can say no thanks if they don't want to, work with me. Like that's no harm, no skin off my back. It's like how you're doing your business. And I think right now we're in an interesting space where we're still trying to explore like what Roundnet really is. There's much more to say about like, again, we've touched a little bit on like paying players and touching on like the organization of things. There's plenty of work to be done. I know you and I both like, we've had a lot of chats thinking about some of those things, and I'll continue to do that. But yeah, right now, if there's anywhere to start, it's just like being open to the idea that Roundnet could be something more and bigger, and that it doesn't just happen. I think is like a big problem that people struggle with.
You see it in Europe though. Like it wasn't a backyard sport there. It never was. If you got
the culture,
something
right,
and you're like
of like lifelong sport and lifelong play, drop a new sport in their lap and they're like, oh yeah, we do sports. We have these adult sport clubs, right? I know, like I for one am trying to take more of these college clubs and say, hey, like once you leave college, if there's not a community where you are, go build that sport club, that Roundnet sport club. We can have the same thing. And some people are doing it in lots of different flavors, but it's a huge example to learn from.
And something I tell people when they're like, hey, why do you think like Roundnet is struggling to grow sometimes? And I go, the reputation of Roundnet has to die before it can build again. It has to stop being a backyard sport before it can be a serious sport. If that takes 20 years, it takes 20 years. But we have to understand that people look at Roundnet as goofy. They do. It's like, there's no way to sugarcoat this. People think Roundnet is goofy because it was a backyard sport. They watched 2-year-olds play in the park. Not 2-year-olds, but they watch young kids play in the park. But you go to Europe and they go, we can play on a yellow Like, we can play on this. It's new. It's exciting. Let's go. Let's grab our 40-year-old dad. We're gonna go play. Like they have, like Europe has the oldest team at the Open Pro this Saturday. And it just shows you like their culture over there has never seen the goofy spike ball, because spike ball is never goofy over there. And I think that's something that we really messed up along the way, marketed incorrectly along the way. But again, it's like, you are a sport and you are a business. So you have to do, like, as a marketing major, you have to understand what that means to say, okay, who are our demographics and how are we going to target them? They have been chosen to be marketed towards the more casual consumer. And when you put a lot of money into marketing and your marketing works, which, like, how do you expect your marketing not to work if you're going to spend money on it? Then that makes people think about your sport a certain way, because you market it to them in a certain way. When I open Instagram and I see a spike ball ad of a baby sitting on a trampoline, people are going to open their app and see a baby sitting on a trampoline, and that's what they're going to perceive your sport as. So now they go and see a million crop circles of people playing Roundnet, and they go, they must be a bunch of 2-year-olds. So as someone who understands the marketing world, and like that's kind of what I specialize in, it worked. I don't know what else to say. Like, you successfully did what you wanted to do and set out to do, and now we're here. So how do we move on from here is basically my entire point. Yeah.
I'm just glad you got back to the 2-year-olds in the park, because I was otherwise just woefully lost, and I was like, wow, they're really starting young in Waterloo. Impressive. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great like spot to end off on. That just like we have to take that. I've just had 1 step back, 2 steps forward is how I've thought about like resetting. Exactly. For me, there's a lot of things that need to be reset, but yeah, the expectation of what our sport is, and also like in my view, it's what is our role in it. Talking a little on like things being kind of handed to us or subsidized or like watered down in a way where we didn't really understand the full picture of things. I think there's more and more people who are interested and engaged in these conversations, where the next follow-on step is, okay, you have this background now. So are you,
what are you going to do with it?
Does this discourage you from the sport? Or are you like, oh, I thought Roundnet was like solved, but I guess it's got these cracks and breaks, so I quit. And that's fine. Like, like, I would hope there's a much like stronger growth mentality across the community, but time is really going to tell as far as that goes.
Yeah, I'd really love to touch on the last point that we discussed. Sure. Is like, what can a player do to bring more funding into the sport? Because I feel like that's when we're talking about building the sport. I feel like the consumer, as i.e. the athlete, has some responsibility to grow the sport when it comes to funding.
I think it's important you noted that the athlete is the consumer right now. There's not
exactly.
a next consumer, right? Like, not every single person that's playing has people buying their jerseys. So just wanted to like really emphasize that before you jumped in. So I guess okay. So as a Roundnet athlete, you're a pro athlete, you've been playing for 2 years. It's really hard to understand that it is your job to, one, be a pro athlete, go to the gym, work out, become what people think of when they think of a professional athlete. That's kind of your first goal. Second, it's to understand that your job is not just to be a pro athlete. So you need to be a pro athlete, but you also have to understand that there are other things that are important. And this isn't going to happen for everyone. Like, some people are just competitors in that. They're so driven. And honestly, it's astounding to me. It's awesome. But I think content, as much as I would say that we don't need a million Roundnet coaches that charge $5 a month to be that, some people do it really well, and we need a few people who do it really well. But I think that brands want to see online presences, because the future of marketing and the future of development is online. It just is. So if we all of a sudden get thrown up, so let's say next year $2 million comes in from a sponsor and they want content made. No one knows how to do it yet. No one knows how to do it yet. There's 6 people in the Roundnet community that make content really well, and they want more than 6 people with 1,000 followers on Instagram to make content. So we have to get really good at it right now, so that people come along and they say, oh, these people post 3 times a week. Like, we need more Sanders. I understand that not everyone can post and have a baby and be that handsome at the same time. It's not possible for everyone.
But I think we need to understand that we have to acquire value before we can expect value. I think that's really important. And this brings back to the question of what can a player do to bring funding into the Roundnet community. So it's really important to understand that there is these values to make yourself ready to have someone throw money at you, because you can't expect money thrown at you and then grow. It's like the same thing as like, you're not going to get married and then learn how to be married, right? It's like you kind of want to grow as a person before you get into a commitment, if that makes sense.
I want to like emphasize, because the connection there between like creating value, so that value, so you can attract value, is like very much tied to I think like the stopping point of not necessarily valuing Roundnet, right? So like step one is like see just like inherent value in Roundnet in some way, whatever that is to you, great. And then be part of making Roundnet more valuable. And there's a lot of ways to go about it. I know, like from my end of things, like I'm very vested in like the community having as much say in things. But when I say that also means the community has to do that work, right? Like,
and they have to care enough.
If Roundnet Canada wanted to have their own manufacturing company that made jerseys, they could do it. But it would probably need to be more than one person pitching in that work to make it happen versus Brock making his own company. Like those are two different things for a reason. And you did one, and the other one probably doesn't make sense as an example. But I hope that illustrates some opportunities where people want things, but like to want things is one thing, to actually make it happen is another.
Right. So I will, maybe this is a good place to end. I think I want to emphasize that Nemesis's reason for growing is that I'm trying to make this sport a good environment for investors. Because when you have more integrated brands into a sport, there is more equity inside of the sport. So once I can reach out to someone and like, hey, I printed 2,000 jerseys since April, which we're 45 jerseys away from doing, actually, from hitting 2,000.
That's awesome.
If the next year I'm projecting to sell 4,000 jerseys, do you want your logo on 4,000 jerseys? Give me X. Then there's value inside of the sport that people can get their jerseys even cheaper. Because remember what I said, jerseys with ads, right? I think jerseys with ads are the future of basically every sport. So like the NBA has wish.com on NBA jerseys. Like that's crazy. Like we can do that. But the problem is when you have a sport, and I talked about this earlier for me, 2-player teams are less profitable. But when you have investors who want to put your logo on something, 2-player teams are less, like there's just less view, there's less print, there's less eyes on it. So if I can say, hey, we are having 18 pro teams, every single pro team is in an Nemesis jersey, your logo is going to be on 18 pro teams and 50 contender teams, and that money's going to the players, that money's going to the events, that money's going to this. That's the future of equity. It can't be 2 people that get $30,000 from Razor next year. It's just not going to happen. So how can we build this equity and build the value so that it can translate into the overall growth of players in the future?
Yeah, that being one example of, I think, a couple that people might be looking at as examples to grow value and equity in the sport. So amazing. Thanks, Brock, for making time to chat. Again, I'm going to hold you to making some gold jerseys. Once, you've got time. Once Canada wins a gold medal at the World Championship, I'd love to see the next rendition.
Absolutely.
So you got probably like 4, maybe like 12 years to work on it.
I'll be around. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, no, just don't procrastinate. It's like one of those projects that you've got too much time to work on.
Yeah, I've already started.
I might get lit up in the comments on that.
I've already started working on next World's Canada jerseys, so don't worry about me. We're ahead of the schedule. But yeah,
love it.
Yeah,
sweet,
amazing.
Well, I read all the comments just like Brock does. So let me know what y'all think about any part of this conversation, and hope you enjoyed this one. And I'll see y'all on the next thing.
Thank you guys so much. Talk to you soon.
Do you want to get more money into Roundnet? One small thing you can do is subscribe to channels like this that cover Roundnet. Every little bit helps, and it gets us closer to monetization. You're watching ads on YouTube, you may as well have some of that ad money go back into Roundnet. Oh, and please subscribe to the video, or the channel. You know what I mean. I'm not a YouTuber.